Part 1. The Severing. The Galactic Concordat floated in the darkness of space like a jewel made of metal and light. It was the largest space station ever built, home to diplomats from 847 different species. Ships arrived and departed every hour, carrying messages and ambassadors between thousands of star systems. This was the heart of the Galaxy Empire, where words held more power than weapons, where the future of entire worlds was decided in quiet rooms with soft voices. Ambassador Catherine Zhao stood at the window of her quarters, watching the stars. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and tired eyes that had seen too many negotiations. Earth had sent her here 5 years ago with one mission: make the Galaxy Empire accept humanity as equals. It had been the hardest 5 years of her life. The aliens did not respect humans. They called Earth's people primitives, children who had barely learned to walk among the stars. Humanity had only made first contact 50 years ago, discovering that the galaxy was full of ancient civilizations that had been traveling space for thousands of years. Compared to them, humans were newcomers, unwanted guests at a party that had been going on long before they arrived. Catherine touched the communication device on her wrist. Her assistant's voice came through immediately. "Ambassador, the council is ready for you." She took a deep breath and straightened her formal uniform. Today was important. Today, humanity's petition for full membership would be discussed. Full membership meant protection, trade rights, and most importantly, respect. Catherine had worked for 5 years to reach this moment. The council chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in circles that rose toward the ceiling. Representatives from hundreds of species sat watching as Catherine walked to the center platform. The air smelled strange. A mixture of different atmospheres mixed together so all species could breathe. Translators hummed softly, turning every word into hundreds of languages. High Executor Zalthor dominated the room from his raised throne. He was Valorian, a species that looked like humans but stood 8 feet tall with skin that shimmered like oil on water. The Valorians had ruled the Galaxy Empire for 600 years through military might and political manipulation. Zalthor's eyes were cold as he looked down at Catherine. "Ambassador Zhao," his voice boomed through the chamber, "we have reviewed humanity's petition for full membership. Before we discuss it, there is another matter we must address." Catherine felt her stomach tighten. This was not part of the scheduled meeting. Zalthor's image appeared on screens throughout the chamber, making him impossible to ignore. Humanity has been mining resources in the Kepler 442 system. This system was claimed by the Valorian expansion fleet 200 years ago. "You are stealing from the Empire." The accusation hit Catherine like a physical blow. She had prepared for many arguments, but not this lie. The Kepler 442 system had been unclaimed when human colony ships arrived there 15 years ago. Every survey, every legal document proved it. "High Executor." Catherine kept her voice calm and professional. "The Kepler 442 system was unclaimed according to all Empire records. My government has all documentation proving our legal right to mine there. I can provide these documents now if the Council wishes to review them." She pulled up holographic displays showing star charts, legal filings, and resource surveys. Every piece of evidence was clear. The system had been empty, unclaimed, and legally opened for settlement. Zalthor's face twisted with anger. In Valorian culture, contradicting a superior was an insult. Having a human, a species he considered beneath his own, prove him wrong in front of the entire council was unbearable. "You dare to accuse me of lying?" Zalthor stood from his throne, his voice shaking with rage. "You primitives from your small blue world think you can speak to me as an equal? You have been in space for barely 50 years. My people were building empires while yours were still living in caves." The chamber fell silent. Other species watched nervously. Some looked sympathetic to Catherine. Others looked away, afraid to draw Zalthor's anger toward themselves. Catherine stood straight, refusing to be intimidated. "High Executor, I mean no disrespect. I am simply presenting facts. The Kepler 442 system was legally settled by humanity. We have broken no laws." "Laws?" Zalthor laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. "You think your species deserves the protection of our laws? You think you can stand in this chamber and embarrass me before the council? Let me show you what happens when primitives forget their place." He pressed a control on his throne. Armed guards appeared from side doors. 10 Valorian soldiers in powered armor carrying energy weapons. They surrounded Catherine before she could react. "High Executor," a voice called from the council seats. It was Ambassador Trell from the Mindari species, a small reptilian creature known for following rules carefully. This is a diplomatic chamber. The ambassador has protection under the Treaty of Silence, Zalthor roared. I am the law in this chamber. I decide what happens here. Catherine's heart pounded as the guards grabbed her arms. She did not struggle. Her training had prepared her for political battles, not physical ones. She looked around the chamber, seeing fear in the eyes of other ambassadors. No one was going to help her. You came here seeking membership, Zalthor said, walking down from his throne to stand before Catherine. You wanted to be treated as equals. But there is a natural order in the galaxy, human. Strong species lead. Weak species follow. Those who cannot understand this simple truth must be taught. He drew a ceremonial blade from his belt, a weapon made of pure energy that hummed and glowed. Catherine understood what was about to happen. She stopped struggling against the guards and stood as straight as she could. I am a protected diplomat, she said clearly, her voice carrying throughout the chamber. What you are about to do violates every treaty, every law, every principle that holds the Galaxy Empire together. The only principle that matters is strength, Zalthor said. And your species has none. Catherine looked directly into the cameras that broadcast council meetings across the galaxy. She knew millions of beings on thousands of worlds were watching. She knew her words would reach Earth, would reach her family, would reach every human in the galaxy. You have made a grave mistake, she said. Humanity remembers. Zalthor swung the blade. The execution was over in seconds. The chamber erupted into chaos. Some ambassadors screamed and ran. Others sat frozen in shock. A few species stood and formally protested, but their words were meaningless now. Zalthor cleaned his blade and returned to his throne as if nothing important had happened. Let this be a lesson, he announced. The Galaxy Empire has order. Those who disrupt that order will be removed. Humanity's petition for membership is denied. All human colonies will submit to Valorian oversight or be removed by force. On Earth, billions of people watched the broadcast. The United Earth Government building in Geneva became silent as a tomb. President Chen sat in his office, hands shaking, watching the replay of Ambassador Zhao's final moments over and over again. Emergency meetings were called immediately. Military advisors, diplomats, scientists, and government leaders gathered. The Galaxy Empire expected humanity to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, to offer tribute and accept inferior status. Instead, President Chen gave a different order. Recall every human from Empire space, every diplomat, every trader, every scientist, every tourist. Bring them all home immediately. Sir, his chief of staff asked carefully, what about the Empire's demands? President Chen stood and walked to the window, looking up at the stars where Catherine Zhao had died. Humanity has spent 10,000 years fighting wars on Earth. We stopped because we thought we had grown beyond it. We thought joining the galactic community meant we could leave our violent past behind. He turned to face the room, and his advisors saw something cold and terrible in his eyes. We were wrong. They want to see what humanity is capable of? Let's show them. Across Earth, military bases went to full alert. Shipyards that had been building peaceful exploration vessels began retooling for war. Soldiers who had spent years training for peacekeeping missions received new orders. Scientists who had been developing civilian technology turned their knowledge toward weapons. The Galaxy Empire had been peaceful for so long that its species had forgotten what real war looked like. They were about to remember. Fleet Admiral Marcus Reeves stood before the Earth War Council 3 days after Ambassador Zhao's execution. Behind him, holographic displays showed the deployment of the human fleet. 50 warships, the entire military force humanity had built since reaching the stars. Against the Empire's thousands of ships, it seemed like nothing. They wanted to send a message, Admiral Reeves said quietly. Let's make sure the galaxy never forgets our reply. Part 2. The Sleeping Giant Awakens. The silence from Earth lasted for 3 weeks. During that time, every human ship in Galaxy Empire space disappeared. Traders abandoned their cargo. Scientists left their research stations. Tourists cut their vacations short. Within days, hundreds of thousands of humans had vanished from Empire worlds, retreating to the Sol system like water draining from a bathtub. The Empire's intelligence services tried to track what was happening inside human space, but their spy satellites went dark. Their listening posts detected nothing. Communication networks that had connected Earth to the galaxy for 50 years simply stopped working. It was as if humanity had pulled a curtain closed, hiding themselves from view. High Executor Zalthor watched these developments with satisfaction from his palace on Valoria Prime. He had shown the humans their place, and now they were cowering in their home system, probably arguing amongst themselves about how to apologize. He imagined human leaders composing messages of surrender, offering tribute and begging for mercy. They are cowards, he told his military advisors. Like all primitive species, they make noise but lack the courage to fight. What Zalthor did not know was that humanity had spent the last century becoming very, very good at war. While Empire species fought ceremonial battles with rules about honor and proper conduct, humans had perfected the art of total war. Nuclear weapons, chemical agents, biological weapons, kinetic bombardment, psychological warfare, guerrilla tactics, cyber attacks. Humans had invented 1,000 ways to destroy each other, and only stopped when they finally united under one government. Now, all that terrible knowledge was being remembered. In secret military bases on Earth's moon, scientists worked around the clock. The weapons they had locked away decades ago were brought out, studied, and improved with new technology. Warships designed for peaceful exploration were stripped down and rebuilt as instruments of destruction. Factories that made civilian goods switched to producing ammunition, missiles, and military equipment. Admiral Marcus Reeves stood on the bridge of the UESS Retribution, humanity's newest warship. It was smaller than Empire battleships, but faster and more agile. Its hull was covered in armor made from materials the Empire had never seen. Its weapons were not the energy beams and plasma cannons the Galaxy used, but railguns that could fire metal slugs at relativistic speeds and missile swarms that moved with artificial intelligence. Status report, Admiral Reeves ordered. Strike Force Vengeance is ready, sir, his tactical officer replied. 50 ships, 15,000 crew, all systems operational. Admiral Reeves nodded slowly. 50 ships against an empire of thousands seemed like suicide, but he had studied every battle the Empire had fought in the last 100 years. He knew how they fought, what tactics they used, what weapons they preferred. The Empire had been at peace for so long that their military had become ceremonial, more focused on looking impressive than actually fighting. Humans, on the other hand, had never forgotten how to kill. Send the signal, Admiral Reeves ordered. Execute the Zhao Protocol. Back in Empire space, High Executor Zalthor was growing impatient. 3 weeks had passed and Earth had sent no response to his demands. He decided to increase the pressure. Valorian warships began appearing at human colony worlds, small settlements on the edges of Empire space where a few thousand humans lived and worked. The colonists were given simple choices: submit to Valorian authority or be removed. Most colonies chose to resist, sending desperate messages to Earth asking for help. The Valorians responded with overwhelming force, landing troops and rounding up human families. Thousands were loaded onto prison ships, declared property of the Valorian state, to be sold as slaves to species who needed workers. Zalthor announced his actions proudly, broadcasting messages across the galaxy. This is what happens to species who forget their place. The humans have 2 options now: surrender unconditionally and deliver 10 million of their people as reparations, or watch as we take them by force. The galaxy watched nervously. Some species thought Zalthor was going too far, but no one dared speak against him. The Valorians were too powerful, their military too strong. Species who had opposed them in the past had been crushed and absorbed into the Empire. Then, exactly 1 month after Ambassador Zhao's execution, humanity finally responded. The Valoria Prime system was the heart of Valorian civilization. Their homeworld orbited a yellow star, protected by the most powerful defensive fleet in the galaxy. 300 warships patrolled the system constantly, enough firepower to destroy entire planets. No enemy had threatened Valoria Prime in 600 years. On that day, sensors detected something emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. At first, the Valorian commanders thought it was a trading convoy that had gotten lost. Then the sensor readings came in clearly. 50 warships, human design, moving toward Valoria Prime at high speed. The Valorian fleet commander laughed when he saw the report. 50 ships against 300? It was barely worth leaving orbit. But protocol demanded a response, and Zalthor wanted the humans crushed publicly, so the entire fleet moved to intercept. News of the coming battle spread across the galaxy within minutes. Every species turned their attention to Valoria Prime. This would be humanity's end, everyone agreed. The Valorians would destroy the human fleet, then move on Earth itself and finish what Zalthor had started. Admiral Reeves watched the Valorian fleet approaching on his tactical display. 300 ships moving in perfect formation, like they were on parade. Beautiful to look at, but tactically stupid. They were bunched together, making themselves easy targets, probably trying to look intimidating. All ships, break formation, Admiral Reeves ordered. Alpha pattern. Engage at maximum range. The human fleet scattered like a flock of birds, each ship moving independently. The Valorian fleet tried to follow, but their ships were slower, designed for looks rather than maneuverability. By the time they adjusted their formation, the human ships had already opened fire. Railgun rounds crossed the distance at incredible speeds. The Valorians had shields designed to stop energy weapons, but the kinetic projectiles punched through them like paper. 3 Valorian ships exploded in the first salvo, torn apart before they could return fire. Chaos erupted in the Valorian fleet. Their commanders had never faced an enemy that fought like this. Energy weapons were traditional, predictable, easy to defend against. These solid projectiles were something their shields had never been designed to stop. The humans pressed their advantage ruthlessly. Missile swarms launched from every human ship, thousands of small projectiles that moved with artificial intelligence, dodging point defense fire and seeking weak spots in Valorian armor. The missiles coordinated with each other, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. Valorian ships began exploding in groups. Their communications networks, designed for ceremonial battles and slow, predictable warfare, could not keep up with the speed of human attacks. Orders took too long to transmit. Responses came too late. Ships that had been in formation minutes ago were now scattered and dying. "They're trying to retreat," the tactical officer reported. Admiral Reeves showed no emotion. "Don't let them. I want every ship that came here to stay here." Human ships moved with precision, cutting off escape routes. Cyber warfare teams hacked into Valorian systems, feeding false information to their sensors and disrupting their faster-than-light drives. Ships that tried to run found their engines failing at critical moments, leaving them vulnerable. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, all 300 Valorian warships were destroyed or crippled beyond repair. The human fleet had suffered damage to 6 ships but lost none. 15,000 human sailors looked at their tactical displays in stunned silence, barely believing what they had accomplished. Admiral Reeves stood on the bridge of the Retribution, looking at the wreckage floating in space around them. He felt no joy at the victory, only a cold satisfaction that justice was being served. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Broadcast to the entire galaxy." When the channel opened, Admiral Reeves spoke clearly and calmly. His words were translated into 800 languages and transmitted to every world in the Empire. "I am Fleet Admiral Marcus Reeves of the United Earth Space Forces. 1 month ago, the Galaxy Empire executed Ambassador Catherine Zhao, a protected diplomat in violation of every law and treaty that civilized species hold sacred. The Empire then attacked our colonies and enslaved our people. They called us weak. They said we were primitives who knew nothing of strength." He paused, letting the images of the destroyed Valorian fleet fill the screens. "You took one of ours. We have come for payment. This is just the interest. Every world that participated in attacking our colonies, every ship that carried our people into slavery, every official who supported the execution of our ambassador, will answer for their crimes. We will not stop until justice is served." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings sat in shocked silence. The Valorians, who had dominated the Empire for 6 centuries through military might, had just lost their home fleet in a single afternoon. The humans, primitive newcomers who had been dismissed as weak, had destroyed 300 warships without losing a single vessel. On Valoria Prime, High Executor Zalthor watched the recording of the Part 3. The flood, the destruction of the Valorian home fleet, was only the beginning. Within 3 days, human warships appeared in 17 different star systems simultaneously. Every appearance followed the same pattern: arrive without warning, destroy military targets with overwhelming force, then broadcast surrender terms. Worlds that surrendered were left alone. Worlds that resisted were hit with orbital bombardment that turned military bases into smoking craters. The Galaxy Empire had never seen warfare like this. For 1,000 years, battles had been ceremonial affairs with rules and traditions. Fleets met in open space, exchanged fire until one side admitted defeat, and then negotiations began. Civilians were never targeted. Cultural sites were protected. War was almost civilized. Humanity ignored every rule. Admiral Reeves commanded the human fleet like a surgeon using a scalpel, cutting away at Valorian military power with precise strikes. But his precision was backed by brutal efficiency. When Valorian forces tried to hide among civilian populations, human cyber warfare teams tracked them using surveillance technology the Empire had never imagined. When Valorian ships tried to run, human hunter-killer drones followed them through faster-than-light jumps. Relentless and unstoppable. On the human warship Retribution, Admiral Reeves studied intelligence reports from across Valorian space. His officers watched him work, seeing the toll this campaign was taking on their commander. Reeves had not slept more than 4 hours a night since the war began. His hair had grown grayer. Lines had deepened around his eyes, but his determination never wavered. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we are receiving surrender requests from 6 more Valorian colonies. They are offering to lay down weapons and submit to occupation." "Accept their surrender," Reeves said. "Send peacekeeping forces and medical supplies. Make sure their civilians are protected and fed." "Some of the crew are asking why we are helping Valorian civilians," the officer said carefully. "After what they did to our colonies." Admiral Reeves looked up sharply. "We are not like them. We fight military targets, not civilians. We destroy those who attacked us, not innocent people who had no say in their government's crimes. The day we start targeting children and families is the day we become the monsters they claimed we were." The officer nodded and left to carry out the orders. Reeves turned back to his star charts, planning the next phase of the campaign. Across the galaxy, other species watched humanity's advance with growing alarm. The Valorians had dominated the Empire for centuries, controlling the military and making the rules. Dozens of species lived under Valorian oversight, paying tribute and following Valorian laws. Now that military dominance was crumbling, and the careful order of the galaxy was falling apart, some species saw opportunity. The Mindari, who had been conquered by Valorians 200 years ago, launched their own rebellion. They attacked Valorian outposts in their territory and declared independence. The Chiral Unity, a collection of small worlds forced to pay tribute to Valoria, stopped their payments and requested human protection. Other species tried to maintain neutrality, declaring they had no involvement in the conflict between humanity and Valoria. But neutrality was becoming harder to maintain as human ships appeared in system after system, systematically destroying Valorian military infrastructure. On the Galactic Concordate Station, the Celestial Throne held emergency sessions daily. The council chamber where Ambassador Zhao had been executed now felt like a tomb. Many ambassadors refused to sit in their seats, afraid that humanity might target the station itself. Ambassador Trell of the Mindari species spoke before the council, his reptilian voice shaking with suppressed anger. "For 600 years, the Valorians have ruled through fear and violence. We stayed silent when they conquered our worlds. We said nothing when they enslaved species who resisted. We looked away when they executed a diplomat in this very chamber. Now we see the result of our cowardice. A species we called primitive is destroying the most powerful military in the galaxy because we were too afraid to stand up for what was right." Several ambassadors nodded in agreement, but no one spoke out loud. High Executor Zalthor was not present, having fled to a secret fortress deep in Valorian space, but his supporters still held positions of power throughout the Empire. The Council's attempts to negotiate with humanity went nowhere. Every message sent to Earth received the same response. The war would end when Zalthor and all those responsible for Ambassador Zhao's execution faced justice, and when all human colonists taken as slaves were returned safely. Until then, humanity would continue its campaign. On military bases throughout Valorian space, commanders began to realize they could not win. Human technology was superior in every way that mattered. Human tactics were unpredictable and ruthless. Human soldiers fought with a determination that seemed unbreakable. Worse, humanity seemed to have an endless supply of resources, as if they had been preparing for this war for decades. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. Humanity had been preparing for war for 10,000 years. Every weapon system, every tactical doctrine, every strategy humanity deployed had been developed and refined through millennia of fighting amongst themselves. The galaxy species had evolved in relatively peaceful environments, developing technology slowly and fighting occasional small conflicts. Humanity had evolved on a world that tried to kill them constantly, and they had spent their entire history learning how to kill each other more efficiently. Now all that knowledge was focused on a single enemy. The siege of military station Valoria 7 showed the galaxy just how thorough humanity's approach to war could be. The station orbited a gas giant deep in Valorian territory, serving as a major supply depot and fleet assembly point. When human ships arrived, the Valorian commander refused to surrender, confident in his station's heavy defenses and the 200 warships under his command. The battle that followed became legendary. Human ships did not attack directly. Instead, they deployed thousands of small mines throughout the system, cutting off every approach route. They hacked into the station's computer systems, shutting down life support and military sections while leaving civilian areas untouched. They jammed all communications, preventing calls for help. Then they simply waited. After 3 weeks, with food running low and systems failing, the Valorian commander surrendered. Not a single shot had been fired. 200 warships and a major military station captured without casualties on either side. The Valorian crews were taken prisoner and treated according to the rules of warfare that humanity insisted on following. Even when their enemies did not, the message was clear. Humanity could destroy their enemies quickly if needed, but preferred to win without unnecessary bloodshed. It was a combination the galaxy found deeply unsettling. A species capable of terrible violence but choosing mercy whenever possible was something the Empire's leaders could not understand. As weeks turned into months, the map of Valorian space changed. Red markers showing Valorian military control disappeared, replaced by blue markers indicating human occupation. Entire fleets surrendered without fighting. Planets declared neutrality and asked for human protection. The Valorian military, which had numbered over 5,000 ships at the war's start, was reduced to a few hundred vessels scattered across their remaining territory. High Executor Zalthor watched his empire crumble from his hidden fortress. He sent message after message demanding that other Empire species come to Valoria's aid, but no help arrived. The species he had dominated for centuries suddenly discovered urgent reasons why their fleets could not be deployed. Some claimed mechanical problems. Others cited domestic emergencies. The truth was simpler. No one wanted to face humanity's military might. In desperation, Zalthor authorized the use of forbidden weapons. Biological agents were deployed on 3 human-occupied worlds, killing thousands of colonists and occupation troops. Chemical weapons were used against human ships, violations of every warfare treaty the galaxy had agreed to centuries ago. Humanity's response was swift and merciless. The bases that launched the biological weapons were hit with kinetic bombardment from orbit. Massive slugs of metal dropped at incredible speeds that hit with the force of nuclear weapons. The ships that used chemical weapons were hunted down by human hunter-killer packs and destroyed, their crews given no chance to surrender. Admiral Reeves addressed the galaxy after these incidents, his face appearing on screens across thousands of worlds. He looked tired and angry, like a man who had hoped for better but expected worse. The Valorian leadership has chosen to use weapons of mass destruction against our forces and our civilians. These weapons have been banned by galactic law for 800 years. We will respond proportionally. Every base, every ship, every installation that possesses or deploys these weapons will be destroyed. We offer no warnings, no chances to surrender. If you use forbidden weapons, you forfeit any right to mercy. True to his word, human intelligence networks identified every Valorian facility that stored biological or chemical weapons. Within 1 week, all of them were destroyed. The strikes were precise, targeting only the weapon storage facilities and leaving surrounding areas untouched. But Part 4, Justice and Judgment. The breach of Galactic Concordate Station was done with surgical precision. Human Marines in powered armor moved through the corridors in coordinated teams, using non-lethal weapons whenever possible. They had detailed maps of the station's layout, provided by species who had secretly supported humanity's campaign. Every step was calculated to minimize casualties and maximize control. Within 6 hours, the station was secured. The Marines had captured over 3,000 Valorian soldiers without killing a single one. Medical teams followed immediately behind the combat troops, treating wounded and ensuring civilians were safe. Food and water were distributed to areas where supplies had run low during the blockade. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity demonstrated another aspect of their nature. They could be ruthless destroyers when necessary, but they were equally capable of careful restraint. Every action seemed designed to prove that humanity fought for justice, not conquest. High Executor Zalthor was found in his private chambers aboard the station, surrounded by his personal guards. The Valorian soldiers knew they could not win against the human Marines, but their honor demanded they make a stand. The human commander offered them one chance to surrender peacefully. Lay down your weapons. Your leader will face trial, but you can walk away from this. There has been enough death. The guards looked at each other, then at Zalthor, who sat on his throne with his head in his hands. Slowly, one by one, they placed their weapons on the floor and stepped back. Zalthor did not resist as human Marines placed restraints on his wrists. The being who had ruled a significant portion of the galaxy for decades was led away like a common criminal. His head bowed in defeat. With Zalthor captured, humanity began the next phase of their plan, holding those responsible accountable for their crimes. But instead of simply executing the Valorian leadership as many expected, humanity did something the galaxy had never seen before. They announced a trial. President Chen addressed the galaxy from Earth, standing before the rebuilt United Nations building, where humanity had learned to resolve conflicts through law rather than violence. His words were translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast to every inhabited world. The Galaxy Empire was founded on principles of order, law, and peaceful cooperation between species. Those principles were violated when Ambassador Catherine Zhao was executed without trial, without evidence, without any respect for diplomatic immunity or basic justice. We could respond to this crime with simple revenge, but that would make us no better than those who committed it. He paused, letting his words sink in. Instead, we will demonstrate what humanity believes true justice looks like. High Executor Zalthor and all those who supported or participated in Ambassador Zhao's murder will stand trial. They will be given lawyers to defend them. They will be allowed to present evidence. They will have every right to prove their innocence if they can. The trial will be public, broadcast across the galaxy so all species can see that humanity's fight was never about conquest or revenge. It was always about justice. The trial began 3 weeks later aboard the Galactic Concordat station, in the very chamber where Ambassador Zhao had died. The room had been converted into a courtroom, with human judges from Earth's highest courts presiding. Representatives from dozens of species were invited to observe, including legal experts from the galaxy's most respected civilizations. Zalthor and 17 other Valorian officials sat in the defendants' section, each provided with legal counsel and translators. The prosecution team consisted of human lawyers and legal experts from allied species, all volunteers who believed in the importance of this trial. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Every session was broadcast live across the galaxy, watched by billions of beings who had never seen anything like it. The concept of a public trial where evidence was presented and both sides could argue their case was foreign to most species. The Empire's justice system typically consisted of those in power, making decisions and enforcing them. This collaborative search for truth through evidence and argument was revolutionary. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Video recordings of Zalthor ordering Ambassador Zhao's execution, documents showing he knew she was a protected diplomat, communications proving he planned to use her death as an example to intimidate other species, testimony from guards who had carried out the execution, from ambassadors who had witnessed it, from intelligence officers who had documented everything. The defense argued that Zalthor had acted within his authority as High Executor, that the Empire's laws gave him power over all matters in the council chamber, that Ambassador Zhao had insulted him in a way that demanded response according to Valorian culture. The human judges listened carefully to both sides, asking questions, examining evidence, consulting with legal experts. They showed no anger, no desire for revenge, only a careful determination to find truth and apply law fairly. Ambassador Trell of the Mindari testified during the trial, his reptilian body shaking with emotion as he spoke. I was there when it happened. I saw Ambassador Zhao present clear evidence that she had broken no laws. I watched High Executor Zalthor ignore that evidence because he could not tolerate being contradicted by someone he considered inferior. This was not justice, it was murder. Other ambassadors testified similarly. Some admitted they had been too afraid to speak up at the time, terrified that Zalthor would turn his anger on their species next. Their testimony painted a picture of the Galaxy Empire, not as a peaceful coalition, but as a protection racket run by the Valorians through fear and violence. On the 38th day of trial, the judges announced their verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the chief judge, an elderly woman from Earth named Justice Martinez, read the decision. We have examined all evidence presented. We have heard testimony from dozens of witnesses. We have consulted legal experts from 17 different species regarding the laws and treaties that govern diplomatic conduct. Our verdict is unanimous. She looked directly at Zalthor, who sat motionless in his seat. High Executor Zalthor, you are found guilty of murder of a protected diplomat, violation of diplomatic immunity, conspiracy to commit genocide against human colonists, and crimes against sapient life. 3 of your co-defendants are found guilty of participating in these crimes. The others are found guilty of lesser charges related to their roles in these events. Zalthor showed no reaction. He had known the verdict was coming since the trial began. The sentence for these crimes is death, Justice Martinez continued. However, humanity recognizes that we are not the only victims here. The Valorian Empire under your leadership oppressed dozens of species for centuries. Many beings suffered and died because of your actions. Therefore, we will not carry out this sentence ourselves. She gestured to a group seated in the observers section. Representatives from 12 species that had been conquered or oppressed by the Valorians stood up, their faces showing grim satisfaction. You will be turned over to representatives from the species you victimized. They will decide how justice should be served. We believe that those who suffered most have the right to determine punishment. The courtroom erupted in noise. Some observers cheered. Others looked shocked. The human judges waited for quiet to return. For the other defendants, Justice Martinez continued, sentences will vary based on their level of involvement and their willingness to cooperate with post-war reconstruction. Some will face imprisonment. Others will be placed under supervision. All will be monitored to ensure they cannot threaten peace again. Zalthor was led from the courtroom, surrounded by guards from multiple species who had suffered under Valorian rule. The being who had dominated the galaxy through fear would face justice from those he had victimized. It was a fitting end, many agreed, more merciful than he deserved but more just than simple revenge. With the trial complete, humanity presented its terms for ending the war. President Chen met with representatives from the Celestial Throne Council, now reorganized without Valorian dominance. The meeting was tense but professional. Earth's terms are these, President Chen began. First, the Valorian military will be completely dissolved. Their weapons will be decommissioned. Their warships will be converted to civilian use or scrapped. Valoria will maintain only a small defense force sufficient to protect their worlds from pirates, nothing more. Several council members nodded. They had expected this. Second, the Celestial Throne will be restructured. No single species will hold dominant power. Decisions will be made by democratic vote, with representatives from all member species having equal voice. Species that have been oppressed or conquered will be given independence and the right to join or leave the empire as they choose. This caused more reaction. The empire had been hierarchical for 1,000 years, with powerful species controlling weaker ones. Democracy was a human concept that made many uncomfortable. Third, Chen continued firmly, a war crimes tribunal will be established, permanent and independent. Any species that commits atrocities like those the Valorians committed will face justice. Diplomatic immunity will be absolute and protected by all member species. Violations will be treated as attacks on the entire galactic community. Fourth, all species taken as slaves during the war will be freed immediately in Part 5. The new order 10 years had passed since the war ended. The Galactic Federation, as it was now called, looked very different from the old empire. Democratic councils replaced authoritarian rule. Independent courts protected rights and resolved disputes. Species that had been conquered or oppressed now participated as equals in galactic affairs. The transformation was not perfect and many challenges remained, but progress was undeniable. Earth had become one of the most respected members of the Federation, holding a permanent seat on the Security Council not through conquest but through the reputation earned during the war. When disputes arose between species, they often asked for human mediators, knowing that Earth's representatives valued justice over politics. When threats emerged, they requested human peacekeeping forces, trusting that humans would use overwhelming force only as a last resort. The human military, once seen as primitive and weak, was now the standard by which other species measured their own forces. Training programs established by Earth taught Federation security forces everything from basic tactics to advanced cyber warfare. But humans also taught the ethics of warfare, emphasizing the importance of protecting civilians, following rules of engagement, and using minimum necessary force. Ambassador Sarah Zhao walked through the corridors of the Galactic Concordat station, her diplomatic credentials displayed prominently on her uniform. She was 28 years old with her mother's dark hair and determined expression. She had been 5 years old when her mother was executed in this station, too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to remember the sadness that fell over her family. Growing up, Sarah had considered many career paths. Her father wanted her to be an artist or scientist, anything that would keep her safe and far from politics. But Sarah had felt drawn to diplomacy, to the same work that her mother had given her life for. She attended the Earth Diplomatic Academy, graduated at the top of her class, and requested assignment to the Galactic Federation. Now she served as one of Earth's junior ambassadors, participating in trade negotiations and cultural exchanges. The work was routine most days, but Sarah never forgot the importance of what she did. Every time she walked through the station, she passed the spot where her mother had died. The exact location was marked now with a crystal statue, a memorial that had become famous across the galaxy. Today was different from usual days. Today, a new species was being welcomed into the Galactic Federation. The Kral Dominion had petitioned for membership 6 months ago, and after careful review, their application had been approved. The Kral were a militaristic species, tall and powerful, with a culture that valued strength and courage above all else. Sarah attended the welcoming ceremony as part of Earth's diplomatic delegation. The Great Council Chamber, rebuilt and redesigned after the war, was filled with representatives from hundreds of species. The atmosphere should have been celebratory, but Sarah sensed tension in the room. The Kral delegation carried themselves with arrogance, treating other species with barely concealed contempt. The Kral ambassador, a massive being named General Kraith, gave a speech accepting the Federation's welcome. His words were polite enough, but his tone suggested he viewed Federation membership as a formality rather than an honor. When he finished speaking, other ambassadors applauded politely, though Sarah noticed many seemed uncomfortable. During the reception that followed, Sarah observed the Kral delegates interacting with other species. They were dismissive toward smaller beings, mocking toward species with peaceful cultures, and openly contemptuous of Federation customs they considered weak. General Kraith approached a group of ambassadors from the Parvian Collective, a species of small, peaceful beings who specialized in agriculture and art. The Parvians were explaining their culture's emphasis on harmony and cooperation when Kraith interrupted with a harsh laugh. Harmony? Cooperation? Kraith's voice boomed across the room. Weak species always hide behind pretty words. In the real universe, strength is all that matters. The strong dominate, the weak serve. That is the natural order. The Parvian ambassadors looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Around the room, other species exchanged worried glances. This was exactly the kind of thinking that had led to the Valorian atrocities and the war that followed. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. She had heard these words before, in historical recordings and trial transcripts in her mother's final message. She knew where this kind of thinking led. Setting down her drink, she walked calmly across the room toward General Kraith. General Kraith, Sarah said clearly, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. Might I have a word with you? The Kral general turned to look at her, his expression showing barely concealed amusement. A young human female barely reaching his chest, daring to interrupt him. What is it, little diplomat? Sarah maintained her calm expression, though inside her heart was pounding. I could not help but overhear your comments about strength and weakness. As a new member of the Galactic Federation, you should understand something important about how things work here. And what might that be? Kraith asked, his tone mocking. Sarah looked around the room, making eye contact with ambassadors from dozens of species. In this federation, we respect all sapient life, regardless of physical strength or military power. We protect diplomats as sacred, because diplomacy is how civilized species resolve their differences. We resolve disputes through dialogue and law, not through domination and fear. Weak species talk about law, Kraith said dismissively. Strong species make their own rules. The room had gone completely silent now. Every ambassador was watching this exchange. Sarah took a step closer to the Krell general, looking up at him without fear. You are absolutely right that strength matters, General, but you are mistaken about what true strength looks like. Let me tell you what happens when species forget that diplomats are protected, when they decide that might makes right, when they treat others as inferior based on physical power. Her voice grew colder, harder, taking on a tone that made several ambassadors step back instinctively. 10 years ago, a species called the Valorians dominated this council through military might. They believed exactly what you just said, that the strong should rule and the weak should serve. They became so confident in their power that they executed a protected diplomat right here in this station, believing there would be no consequences. Kraith's expression shifted slightly, recognizing the story but not understanding its importance. That diplomat was my mother, Sarah continued, Ambassador Catherine Zhao. And what followed her death was the shortest, most decisive war in galactic history. The Valorian military, which had dominated the Empire for 600 years, was systematically destroyed in 4 months. Not because humanity was physically stronger, but because we were smarter, better prepared, and absolutely committed to justice. She paused, letting her words sink in. Around the room, ambassadors nodded. They remembered. They had watched Earth's military dismantle the Valorians with surgical precision. They had seen the trials, the reorganization, the birth of the Federation from the Empire's ashes. So yes, General, strength matters. But if you ever, and I mean ever, raise a hand against a Federation diplomat, if you ever decide that your physical power gives you the right to dominate others, if you ever forget that we are all equals here regardless of size or military capability. Sarah's expression remained calm, but her eyes held a hardness that made even the towering Krell general shift uncomfortably. Ask the Valorians what happens next. Oh wait, you cannot. Their species exists only as farmers and artists now. Their military is gone. Their dominance ended. There are not enough of them left in positions of power to answer your questions. The silence in the room was absolute. General Kraith's face had gone pale, his earlier arrogance completely vanished. He suddenly understood that this small human female was not threatening him. She was simply stating facts, delivering a warning backed by recent devastating history. I apologize, Kraith said slowly, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. I spoke without understanding. The Krell Dominion has no intention of violating Federation law or threatening diplomats. We come here to learn your ways and participate as equals. Sarah's expression softened slightly. That is good to hear, General. The Federation welcomes all species who come in peace and treat others with respect. We hope the Krell will find their place here and contribute to the peace we have all worked to build. She turned and walked away, leaving Kraith standing alone in the center of the room. Slowly, conversations resumed, but the atmosphere had changed. The Krell delegation was noticeably quieter for the rest of the reception, treating other ambassadors with careful respect. Later that evening, Sarah visited the memorial at the center of the station. The crystal statue of her mother stood in the exact spot where she had been executed, facing toward the stars. The inscription beneath had been translated into every galactic language and read, "Let this place remind all species, harm an ambassador, and you harm peace itself. And if you harm peace, humanity will remind you why we climbed from a world of war to reach the stars." Sarah placed her hand on the cool crystal,